Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day. This is the Spiritual Artist Podcast with Chris Miller. If you're like me, you might have gotten up this morning and gotten out of the shower and you look in the mirror and suddenly all sorts of statements might be coming through your head. Oh, look at that. I have love handles, or why do I have so many gray hairs, or anything that you can name, with all this body shame that we have, this kind of way that we see ourselves. And being a spiritual artist is about being conscious to that, being conscious to the language that you're using when you look at yourself, or when you paint, or when you're creative. So I'm really pleased to have today's guest. I met Terry several years ago in a business networking group, and he is a photographer, a portrait photographer, and I have followed him on Instagram. Without any ado, I'm going to introduce Terry. I'm going to say, quote, McCraney Rickman. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning. And it is Terry Rickman.
I wanted to point out that you were just married, and some people might not know that new last name.
Absolutely. 3 weeks in, and couldn't be happier.
Well, congratulations. I mean, I know it's a big step. My husband and I got married 5 years ago, and it was on our 25th year anniversary. So it was a long time coming, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to introduce what you do here. Terry Rickman is a body and gender affirming portrait photographer with a special focus on the LGBTQ community, and especially the trans community, to create a safe, nurturing space for people to have portraits that allow them to see themselves as they are and not as they are expected to be. That is wonderful, wonderful description, Terry, and it goes even far beyond what I'm talking about when I talk about looking in the mirror. So, where did you find this connection for photography, and how does it motivate you?
So I've always enjoyed photography. It was something I dabbled in for a very long time, and then 2017, I had kind of gotten tired of the corporate grind of going in and working for somebody else all the time. And it wasn't fulfilling. I had an almost 20-year IT career at that point, and was very well established, and the IT sector is very good money, but I just didn't feel fulfillment. There just felt like something was missing in my life. And I started looking around to figure out, what can I do that has more meaning? What can I do that I actually enjoy doing? And I went through a couple of different ideas, and ultimately I landed on, well, let me start a photography business. I've always liked taking pictures, and see if we can make a go of this. So I started out as a corporate headshot photographer, and it did a lot for really letting me lock in like the technical side of my photography. But even that, after a couple of years, it started to feel very mundane. And something was still lacking. Even in my corporate headshot work, I was always, the early days, I can look back at the way that I would talk with people and interact with them. It was very driven toward getting people to, one, just have a good time in front of a camera. Because I'm not paparazzi. So if you're in front of my camera, chances are you're there on purpose. So it shouldn't be something that you dread and don't enjoy. And I personally have had so many bad experiences in front of a camera, just because I didn't know what to do, and it felt super stiff and uncomfortable. I was awkward about my own body, and I wanted to take that away. I wanted to make that a fun experience for people, especially because what I hear time and time again from people is that, oh, I'll do it when I lose 10 pounds. Can you hide my wrinkles? I hope you have a good lens, because you're going to need to do a lot of work on me. Are you good with Photoshop? And it breaks my heart, because that tells me so much about where someone's mental state is about their own body and their physical appearance, and what they think they have to look like to be acceptable. And so when the lovely pandemic happened and it basically shut my corporate had shut work down because businesses were remote. No one was hiring me to come and photograph their entire staff anymore. It gave me a chance to reevaluate what I really wanted to be doing and who I was really wanting to serve. And when I wasn't getting as many clients and I was having to pull heavily from the archives of my collection, I kept finding that I was pulling images that were of happy people, that were of the more affirming portraits. And my messaging heavily revolved around helping people come to a place of maybe not always loving yourself, but at least reaching a place of neutrality with your body. And so not speaking negative about it and not thinking negative about it. And it was through that I was like, you know what? This is very important to me. And there's a lot of photographers out there, but no one is very specifically helping the LGBTQ community, and especially the trans and non-binary community, have a space that allows them to be who they are, because we're just at a place still in society that trans and non-binary people can't always present as their true selves out and about, because the world can be a very hateful place sometimes to people that it doesn't understand. My messaging has shifted very heavily towards that and talking to the community to let them know that you are seen and you are welcome here. And no matter what kind of portraits you're wanting to create, we're going to create something that's very affirming, that lets you see yourself for who you really are. So that if out and about in the world, you're having to live stealth and you have to present in a very specific way in order to be safe or feel comfortable in your environment, you at least have those portraits that you can look back on, that for that hour that we spent together, or whatever the scope of the project was we were doing, you can look at those portraits and remember how you felt when you were able to present fully as yourself and see that reflected back, and just let that joy of those images push you through those hard times when it feels very disconnected and scary.
Well, Terry, that is just beautiful. There's so much there to unpack, really, because we talk. I love the part about creating something that they can look back on and kind of capturing that feeling. I never even thought of that. And to be able to reflect back on when times are tough. And, I always tell people to remember their moments of awe, where there's some beauty in their life. And I use that as a spiritual practice. But what you're saying is to remember that image of yourself as that beautiful part of life. Wow. I love it. I'm going to tell my listeners that you really do need to go on Instagram and follow your channel, and we'll put it in the description of this. But so I'm going to be honest with you, Terry. I go through and I'll be looking at Instagram and I'll see pretty yards and little dogs and wagons with children, and then suddenly I'll see one of your images, and it's just like, what? It just every time I gasp. I'm like, and then I go, but it's beautiful. I mean, Terry, it is beautiful what you capture. And so listeners, I don't know if I could put words to this, but you'll take a non-traditional body type in different arrangements, clothing, and you find the love in that you see what I would say is you see the God in them, but you see the God, the essence of God in each person. And so I'll flip through and I'll see someone with, hardly any clothes on, draped over, but it's beautiful. I mean, it's like a famous painting or something. And what I most appreciated about is, you remember some of us are old enough to remember the 70s and 80s. And there was a lot of what you call gimmick photography. Photography meant to just shock you. And that is not what your photography is at all, because your photography has that love and essence in it. It's not about shock at all. It's about honoring people for who they are, where they are, what they are, just as they are. And I love it. So thank you for guys. I always stop. And then I'm going to tell my listeners the next best thing, which maybe you don't even quite realize about yourself, is not only are you a wonderful photographer, but you are a very talented writer. And so you'll put verbiage with these pictures that it's always worth reading. So I'll tell my listeners, don't just look at the image, stop and read what he's saying. And I'm going to quote something from one of your Instagram posts here that I pulled out. And you said, having confidence in your body is a very empowering thing. Being able to look at yourself and say, there are things I don't love about my body, but I still like it. It still brings me joy and provides for me. My want for you is to find a place of peace with your body, to be able to see yourself with all your imperfections and be confident in saying you are enough, exactly as you are right here and now. You don't need to lose weight. You don't need heavy Photoshop and filters. You are good enough as you are. Body affirming portraits are just a way to help you with finding that confidence within yourself, to cast away all that bullshit baggage that has weighed on your self-image for so long. I love that. What a concept. And I always seek out artists that are what I call a spiritual artist, because Terry, you obviously learned the practice of photography for 20 years, but now you're consciously taking pictures, if that makes sense. You're being very aware of what you're doing and how it creates something new. That is a spiritual artist. That's why I have you on the show. So how does it feel when you're taking these pictures? What are you experiencing?
So to kind of take a step back to answer that best, a lot of where I draw from, a lot of the things that the copy that I write about that accompanies each thing, especially if it's self-portrait series, is drawing on my own experiences with having issues with my body. For a long time, living my life as a gay male before I found the words to fully or more fully express who I am, there is a lot of body negativity within the gay male space. And if you don't look a very specific way, you are deemed as less than. And so I internalized that real heavily. And it caused me a lot of issues with having eating disorders and not feeling good enough, not feeling like anyone would ever be attracted to me or want to be with me. And so a lot of it is drawn from there. And that's where it started. And then as I just kept talking to people and listening to what they had to say, I kept hearing the same stories of people, the things that they would say about themselves, these negative words and emotions that they attached around their self-image and what they look like weren't their words. They were the words of society that had been implanted on them and imprinted from the day they were born, the expectations that are set us onto people. And so that's why I try to help people unpack all of that. And so it started out being super, super therapeutic for myself to be able to unpack all of the emotional baggage, damage that I had from years of not feeling good enough and hating my body, and then helping people through that, because I know what it feels like to be at those low points. And I don't want that for anybody else. I don't want people to succumb to anorexia in the way that I did, in the attempt to feel better about themselves, because that's not sustainable and it's not healthy. And so for me, it's about helping people avoid that headspace of thinking they're not good enough, and helping them see that they truly are worthy just as they are right now.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I love the vulnerability, and I think we all feel, a lot of us feel in different ways about that. And we've experienced it in different ways, as you say, and so it's wonderful that you're able to tap in with these people and help them through it. Well, tell me about a really good experience with that, like one of your favorite photo shoots. And
that there's no question. I know I know exactly which one. So I had a gentleman that I worked with a couple years back now, and he was referred to me by a mutual friend, and he was wanting to recreate a portrait that he did in his 30s when he was at the prime of his physique, and he was super proud of this portrait. It hangs in his house, and everyone, it was there as a reminder. But 30 years later, he looks at this portrait and he's reminiscing on what he had and had been ignoring where he's at and appreciating where he's at now. Because unfortunately, because of his becoming HIV positive and the meds associated to that, they were not kind to his body. And so everything that he saw himself as changed because of this medication that was helping to save his life. And when he came to me, he was like, I appreciate where I was. I love this photo of myself, but I am still here today. And I want to recreate this to celebrate the person that I am and what I've come through to get here. And so I told him, I'm like, yeah, I absolutely love what you're telling me. Send me the photo. Let me analyze it, figure out what we can do to recreate this. So he sent it over to me. I spent, I don't know, probably 10 minutes. I was like, absolutely, we can recreate this. So I got everything set up. He came over, we recreated that image for him. Same pose, same lighting, stylistically a little bit different, just so it looks like my work and not something created when this photo was initially created in the, I think it was late 80s, I believe. And so at the unveiling of that portrait, what he wanted to do is he just wanted to hang them side by side on the wall. And I told him, I'm like, this whole thing is about the journey of who you were and who you are and celebrating that. So rather than having these hanging side by side in two separate frames and all of that, like, let's make one art piece out of this. Let's take who you were and who you are, merge them to one piece, and frame them side by side in the same, so that they are always there to tell the story of who you were and who you are. And I went to his house with the final prints after having them custom framed for him, and unveiled it for him. And the pure joy that was on his face and in his voice as he just fell in love with this piece, seeing himself exactly as he envisioned it when he came to me originally, and loving the person that he sees in that photo. That's what I'm trying to create for everybody, is to look at that portrait of themselves that they're going to either put into a photo album, or we're going to create a large wall art piece, and look at that photo and feel joy and excitement for the person that they are.
I think that would be particularly challenging, Terry. I mean, how did you deal with because I think that's a journey, like that's going on an emotional journey with this person. What surely there were parts of him that was like, why am I not like that? How did you help him clear that out, or did he walk through it on his own? Or
so he had already reached a point of being happy with who he is now. The whole reason he wanted to have the portrait was because he was at that place. He wanted he wanted something to celebrate who he is now, and not the end of that journey, because he's still here with us, so that journey has not ended, but celebrating the fact that, hey, yeah, I went through some really difficult stuff, but I've come out of it, and you know what, I'm still worthy, I'm still good.
Yeah.
So for that, I didn't have to. Every once in a while, I work with people that are still at those negative, I say every once in a while, a lot of times, I work with people that are not in the best headspaces about themselves. And so the number one thing that I tell people when we start working together, and I will call you out on it throughout the entire session if you do it, is it's a no negative self-talk space. There are things that you can not be happy with about your body, but you can still appreciate your body. I don't necessarily like the fact that my hair is thinning, but I still appreciate my body. So it's difficult for some people to wrap their heads around feeling discomfort and not liking something, not loving something about themselves, but still being able to appreciate it, even if they can't say, I love it. And so it's helping people through that process of finding at least a place of neutrality and not living in a negative headspace all the time. Because if you can feel good about yourself, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you look at yourself in portraits, that is going to affect everything about your life and how you move through the world. Because if you're looking at yourself in a positive light, if you are able to appreciate the person that you are, the way that you interact with all of the people in your daily life, the way that you do your job, the way that you just experience this world will shift entirely. And I say that from a personal place of experience, because I used to be in a very negative and dark headspace for a very long time. And it was coming through the other end of that I've seen that I am so much more thriving and energetic and able to just love people better because I can love myself.
So when I got up this morning and got out of the shower and immediately said, oh, look at that tire, or why is my stomach so big? I just, how do I just redirect that thought? Just turn it to something I appreciate of myself. Like, oh, I have a good smile. How?
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about pretty frequently for people is you can't love your body all the time. It's impossible. It's not gonna happen. You have to be the most narcissistic person in the world to be in a state of constant love of your body. There's always going to be something that brings you discomfort. When you have those moments, though, find something. It can just be one thing: your smile, your handwriting. It doesn't matter. Find one thing to pull you out of that negative headspace to focus on and be like, but I have this. Yeah, this thing right now isn't bringing me comfort, but I have this. I am more than just this thing that I currently am hyperfixated on that I think is wrong with me. You're a whole person. You're not just your love handles. You're not just the scars on your body. You are all of these things at the same time. And it's learning to appreciate and move through that, so that even if it brings you discomfort, it's still the amazing things that your body is able to allow you to do every single day of your life. It is just unfathomable. And so talking badly about your body, about this thing that allows you to breathe and enjoy all of the myriad of things that exist in this world, just seems like a really weird place to be. Now that I've managed to be able to just self-reflect and look at that and see how much it didn't serve me.
Yeah. I think you're right. It is an incredible life. If you can step out of that self-involvement. In my previous podcast, we talked about how when you feel bad, oftentimes it is too much narcissism. You're looking within too much. And Charles in my last podcast said, going out and helping others or looking outward at things you appreciate is what you're saying. I definitely, and I do agree with positive words. I think words are really important. And even when I say words, I mean the thoughts in your head, because sometimes you don't even say it. You just look in the mirror and there's this little voice in your head talking, and recognizing it is the first step. So I would ask the listeners for the rest of the day after you hear this podcast, start noticing if you're using any negative language when you look in the mirror, or oh, why is my knee crack when I walk, or right, turn it around a little bit. And wonderful. So I wish my listeners could see sometimes, but so let's talk about this the body imaging. And I noticed, I can tell my listeners I'm interviewing you, and Terry has this big dark brown beard and glasses, and then he's got lavender nail polish on. And so I want to talk about this, how we get defined by our how we force ourselves into limiting sexual prototypes. And so I'm going to read another thing that you posted, Terry. I love to throw things back at you so you can hear it coming back at you. But this was something posted a couple of weeks ago that I back in December, I think. I really loved it. I didn't have the words to explain what I was feeling for my entire life until I was close to 40 and had dug deep into understanding the trans and non-binary experience. I saw my life reflected back at me in their stories. I could finally articulate what had been there for decades, wanting to manifest, but feeling like I had to keep it locked inside. There are still times I feel trapped in my body. There are times I want my body to look a different way to be in line with how I feel inside. Then there are other times where I love exactly how my body is right here and now. I had to live in shame, doubt, and fear for nearly my entire life. I don't want for others to have to think that they are alone. So I made a choice to share my lived experience with those that cared to take the time to listen and understand. So that hopefully, if you are someone that is struggling like I was and hear this message, know that you are not broken. You are not strange. You are not alone. So how would you define, what is your identity? How do you identify yourself?
So I am a genderqueer person, slash gender fluid. I don't identify as either male or female, but somewhere within the continuum. I generally, in my day-to-day existence, because we, as liberal as Dallas is, we're still in Texas. So it doesn't always feel safe to fully present as myself. So in my day-to-day life, when people interact with me, I generally am presenting as transmasculine, which can be because of how I look with my beard and everything. People can read me as male, which has a whole lot of privilege and allows me to move through the world without being questioned or stopped or anything like that. But I, for a very long time, suppressed and wouldn't acknowledge the trans femme side of myself, because there are some days where I'm very much to that area. I won't say that side of the spectrum, because I personally don't believe that gender is male, female, and then some gray area between. I think it is so far more complicated than that. And that's the whole point of non-binary, is that you don't feel that you fall within the binary on that spectrum of existence. And so for me, it's made my moving through the world a little easier, being able to have those words to understand. And so at home or in places that I feel are safe, on those days where I do identify more on the feminine side of myself, I'm able to move through those spaces and present in a way that feels more appropriate to me at those times. And not just being stuck in the space of having to always present on the masculine side of things. And it's opened up my enjoyment of just the clothing that I get to wear and the way that I get to express myself. 3 years ago, if you had asked me to go out in public with my nails painted, I would have looked at you crazy, and I would have gotten this sick feeling in my stomach, not because I didn't want to do it, but because of the interaction that I knew I could experience out in the world. And as someone that could pass as a cis white man, I have a massive level of privilege moving through the world and not being questioned. So in order for me to be able to present as myself and how I'm feeling at the time, I have to be willing within myself to give up a lot of my privilege to be able to do that, because I then become an other and not a one of us, the way that I, for 40 years of my life, presented out into the world. So through that, I have made myself more present across social media and my interacting with people, because I realized that growing up, I didn't have, and even as an adult, I didn't have anywhere to look to hear the messages that you're not broken. There are other people that feel just like you do, that identify just like you do. But I didn't have those voices. I didn't see those people. And so I want to be that person for someone that is questioning or struggling, or they know how they identify, but they don't they feel so much internalized shame and stuff because it doesn't line up with what is expected of them. And being able to be that presence that lets someone be able to say to themselves, I feel seen and I'm okay. I am not broken. That's what I want to be for people. And so that's why I live very, very publicly. And that makes my husband very uncomfortable sometimes, because he is a very private and reserved person, and I am a very boisterous and out there person. And so it's walking a tightrope of being okay with putting myself out there and being that figure for people to have someone to relate to, while also respecting the privacy that he has. And I'm really good at getting myself on tangents where I initially was going with.
Well, what I loved about what you're talking about is you talked about that when you do that, when you have those days where you feel a little more confident, maybe is the word, or brave, because there's an amount of bravery there, that it brings about presence, that you're actually being more present, which I like that, because I think you're right. My son, my adopted son, is biracial, but he identifies as Black. And he said to me a couple of weeks ago, he said, the difference is when you go out, people don't spot you. They don't know that I'm gay. He said, but when he walks down the street, they know he's Black. And so you have to do, it's a minority that, or not even a minority, but it's a space that you have to be, you can't shy away from it. An African-American person can't be white for the day. And I've had experiences where it's painful in a different way, because people will say something right to my face, because they think I'm on their, like you said, on their team or one of the in crowd. So it's about being brave with who you are. And what you said is stepping into the out crowd. and how wonderful and brave. And I will tell you, I've seen a lot more men with nail polish in the last few years. I'll see a toenail polish. I'll be like talking to some guy. He's this big gym guy, and I'll look down and he'll have colored toenails. I'm like, what? So I think, embracing that. Now, when I was young, I was always frustrated because I have a lot of things that I love that our society calls feminine traits. I love cooking. I love gardening. I love making things pretty. And all three of those things when I was a kid, they weren't what you call acceptable. They weren't the desirable. I was supposed to want to tackle people and run around in a field, and I didn't. I just don't have that. I don't really have that desire. I'm not competitive in that way. I don't have to watch a football game. It's not something that's in me. So I understand what you're talking about. And I'm in a generation where you're right. We have forced that down so long, that side of me. But sometimes I'll see some woman walking around with this beautiful, colorful dress, and I'll go, "What? Why can't I wear colors like that? Look at that print, the colors." And being an artist, of course, I'm drawn to that, the patterns and the flow. And I will say that when I was younger, that was the one thing I was like, oh, girls can have big dangly bracelets and necklaces that are just huge, ornate things. And so I love it. And once again, I'm going to tell the listeners, I love how you photograph that. You really don't shy away from it. And so when you're flipping through your Instagram feed, you just go, oh, wow, there's a big guy. It looks like a truck driver wearing a beautiful, like sarong or something. It's including you. And yet I want to congratulate you once more, because it's not done for shock value at all. And you can see that it's really done because you can see the beauty in it, the beauty in the lighting, the beauty in how you angled them, the way they're sitting, everything. It's really, really wonderful. So I wanted to bring this up. I mentioned this earlier, and just because I meet so many people, myself included, when I grew up, there was, he, her, and then gay, right? And then we got gay and lesbian, and then we keep adding letters, bisexual, trans, and queer. And so let's talk a little bit, just briefly, about these personal pronouns. So what pronouns would you choose for yourself? And tell me about them. Why are they important?
So by and large, I utilize he and they for my pronouns. I will use any pronouns, as long as it is done in a respectful way. I generally will lean more towards he for the most part, just because it's just easier to move through the world. And as someone that does a lot of educating, sometimes I just want easy interactions. Because a lot of my stuff is about educating and helping people, and trying to be 100% on in that mode all the time can get exhausting. So that's why I still kind of will use he pretty heavily. But for me personally, any pronouns will work, because I identify with all of them. And the pronouns are important only because society has made them so. Everything has been gendered from not even from the moment we're born, from before we're born. Everything is tied around gender. Parents find out, oh, we're having a baby, and they'll do a gender reveal party, which you don't know the gender of anyone until that person tells you their gender, because gender is something that's personal to each person. Now, what they're really saying is, this is what the genitals of my child are, because they have equated gender to genitals. And that's a big part of what I try to help people unlearn, is that gender is something that we as humans created. Gender doesn't have any ties into science or biology or anything like that. We created these roles of men and women so that we could dictate specific roles upon them. And so fortunately, it's much more blurred now, but if you go back, just go back to the 50s, look at like what the era of the 50s was like. The woman was expected to be at home and clean and take care of the family and everything like that. And the man was expected to go out and work and be this big macho person and stuff. And that was very clearly defined, like, this is it. And we as people developed gender so that we could differentiate, like, this is what this is. And the problem is anyone can do any of those things. So the idea of gender roles, of not wanting to appear weaker than, because unfortunately that is the unconscious biases that we have associated with women and the tasks that we have deemed as being roles for women, like taking care of the house, cooking and cleaning and stuff like that. And so you have as I have talked to people cross-generationally, especially when I talk with people like grandparents and my great-grandparents' generations, you have these ideals of like, this is what a man is supposed to be, this is what a woman is supposed to be. And you can see with today's generation, for my own and younger coming up, that those ideas are blurred, because we realize that no, taking care of the house should be something that everyone in the home does. It shouldn't just be one person's responsibility. Taking care of the family, taking care of all of these different aspects of life, it's just, those are just parts of the human experience. They shouldn't be dictated as to male or female. Just like with clothing. Clothing is just a way, I feel, clothing serves two purposes. One, to protect our body from harm, to keep the sun from burning it, to keep us from getting scratched or cut or burned, and the other is an extension of our personalities, to express who we are through the clothing that we wear. And that's it. And so clothing should be degendered, because clothing doesn't have a gender. Which is why I was able to get a lot more comfortable with wearing nail polish. And at 40 years old, after many, many, many decades of wanting to have my ears pierced, at 40 years old, I went and had it done, because I'm like, you know what? I've wanted to have this done forever, but it was it's one of those things that I had to break down my internal fears of how I would be perceived to have my ears pierced, and be like, no, I want to have this done. I want this. I don't think, for me personally, it's something that I could have done before now, because I had to have the words and the confidence that I have had through my own research and understanding of other people having lived trans and non-binary existence, and having those words to be able to articulate who I am and why I want to present in a certain way, and how I feel, which is very unfortunate, because we have so many people that feel trapped into having to be a certain way. And then they they allow themselves the freedom to come out and to express who they are. I worked with someone back late part of last year that had come to me, and she was going through transitioning and needed new photos to represent her business, because everything was pre-transition, and that wasn't the person. And this is someone in their 60s that is finally had the comfort and finally had a space in this world and the support structure that allowed her to be able to become that person. She didn't just become trans at 60. She was always trans. She just wasn't afforded the space to be able to be true to who she was.
Hmm. Oh, Terry, that's beautiful. You know, it is about creating that space. I can see when you talk about this, I'm like, oh, I want to go get my picture taken. Because I think it's almost like you're declaring, actually having a photo is a firm declaration, is it not? It's you know it's a statement because it's a commitment and saying, here is who I am. It's like putting your flag in the ground and saying, this is who I see myself as. um, and I want to go back to what you were saying about clothing and how all these things are not gender specific. And I do see some of those roles breaking down. My son has both of his ears pierced, and he did it at 16. He was like, no problem. But there's still so many things. And I remember when I was young, like buying a pair of glasses and some woman saying, those look like women's glasses. Think about, how do a pair of glasses look feminine? Or we've gotten so caught up on that. And I think what you're doing in helping people acknowledge who they are, not, who they've always been, with pride, is just such a wonderful gift, what you're doing. It's really a wonderful gift because I think we all have it. We all have baggage of growing up and being told. I was told that I shouldn't like to cook. Literally, it was something that I'm so good at. And I was told that doesn't matter because you're a guy. And then another guy's told that he should be a football player just because he's good at it, but maybe he doesn't want to play football. Maybe that's not what his passion is. And learning to acknowledge who and what you are, is really important. So I love this. I love this conversation, and I love talking with you. How do you feel on a spiritual level? It's obviously this is your purpose. You have found your purpose. Would you agree with that?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I've tried, specifically through photography. Like there was a time where I started like, maybe let me go back into the corporate headshot world and do that. It's easy. Those conversations don't require a whole lot of discomfort and stuff. It's just very transactional. This is what I'm providing you. This is what I want. But I always, time and time again, every time I go to create any kind of content, this is the messaging that I come back to. This is what's important to me. This is what I feel I want to leave as my mark on this world when I leave, is helping people feel better about themselves, liking who they are.
Oh, that's just lovely. Do you think anybody listening to this that has been living their life contained or controlled by a certain role, what can they do? What's the first step that they could do to break out of that?
So I would say if you're in a space and you know that you feel a specific way and you're not able to live that truth, surround yourself with like-minded people. Even if you start out on the fringe, just listening and absorbing what is being said. There are so many groups across Facebook and Instagram and just local community groups that you can be part of and just absorb that energy from those spaces, so that you can find that comfort in those words to better articulate who it is you are, so that you can move into a space of being more fully yourself, and work to break down all those years of being told that you're wrong, you're broken, you don't know any better, it's a phase. And getting rid of all of those words that other people cast upon you that you knew didn't feel right, it didn't sit right with the person that you know yourself to be, and let it go and move forward with defining for yourself who you are. and unapologetically living for who you are. That's not always going to be easy because people oftentimes get uncomfortable with change. And so if you living your truth is going to make some people uncomfortable, and it's having to get to a place of being okay with that, and knowing that some people may not ever be able to cope with understanding what it means for you to be able to be who you really are. And
but if you surround yourselves with like-minded people, though, you will create a new support group, a new group that will get you through that. That's what I think, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's just wonderful. Is there anything that you'd like to share with listeners that we haven't talked about?
I would impart them with this. When you feel yourself thinking negative thoughts about who you are, and you think that you're broken, and you're at the end of your rope, and you feel like there's no other way out, there is always another way. There are people out there that will love you and embrace you for exactly the person that you are. You are not broken. You are not ugly. You are not this demon that people try to paint you as. You are absolutely wonderful and beautiful for exactly who you are. The scars on your body, the extra weight that you don't speak kindly about, it's just pieces of who you are. They do not define you. They just help tell the story of the person that you are and the journey that you've been on to get to this point in your life. And who knows what stories are yet to tell. So give yourself a chance to experience those stories.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been so great, Terry. I think my listeners all have something to think about. And also, I think the compassion that if you are happy with who you are, but to recognize the need for other people to have their own definition and not get so threatened by it, or, what does it matter to me? I've always wondered that. I can let everybody be what they are and love them for who they are. So, well, I thank you. I look forward to talking to you more in the future, and I might even be seeing you about some headshots, but I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, make sure you choose the subscribe button so you'll receive new segments when they're released. Plus, check out my new book, The Spiritual Artist, now available on Amazon.com. In the meantime, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.